Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Career Diaries by Elemed, the podcast dedicated to talking about careers in the MedTech industry. And today, I'm honoured to be joined by the one and only, who needs no introduction, Kim Trautman. Thank you for coming on the show, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kim, for those who don't know who you are, although I believe that there's probably very few listening to this who don't know who you are, would you briefly just introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So I've actually been very blessed. I have a wonderful career in the medical device industry here for over 30 years. We won't do exact dates, but started off working for a medical device company, B. Braun, who was in Pennsylvania, and of course the main headquarters in Germany. Starting off on the manufacturing line, second shift, coming back at university holidays and doing non-conforming dispositioning and anything that they needed. Eventually worked myself into the quality assurance laboratory, doing a whole bunch of different micro work, sterility testing, LAL testing back when we still were using rabbits and mice and so forth. Then I had an Army obligation. So I put myself through university with an Army ROTC scholarship and had an Army obligation. Finished my schooling. I have a master's in biomedical engineering. And coming out of university with my master's, I actually wanted to work straight away for the FDA. But my husband is Navy, or was he retired after 36 years in the Navy. And he was stationed in the DC area. So very much wanted to work for FDA, but they had a hiring freeze. So for the first 2 years of my government work, I actually worked in patents, in biotech, in clinical analyzers. And then after 2 years, the FDA opened to intergovernment transfer. So I joined FDA back in 1991. Really loved my experience in over 24 years at FDA. I had many opportunities, which I think we'll talk a bit today about. Starting off early in my career, I had the opportunity to be given the lead of revising the quality system regulation. And so wrote what is still now and soon hopefully to be revised, the quality system regulation, its preamble, a lot of educational rollout. But a part of that, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about today, is some of the international work that went along with that. So I was a member of the Global Harmonization Task Force since inception in 1991. All the way through to 2011, chaired Study Group 3 for 9 of those years, but was a member of all of them. And there was a lot of work with FDA and those international activities. Also was involved in standards very early in my career, starting with the Technical Committee 176, which are the authors of the ISO 9001 series standards. And then in 1994, when TC 210, which many of our audience will know very, very well, since it's such a medical device-centric standards group, joined and have been the international expert for the US on Working Group 1, who authors 13485. One of my non-biological children, as I like to say it, was the Medical Device Single Audit Program, which I actually wrote about the concept back in 1996 when I published a book with FDA as part of the educational rollout. It took 20 years, so I mean, nothing internationally happens quickly. It's oftentimes 2 or 3 baby steps forward, 1 step back. But a lot of movement finally, came about in 2011, and we got that program off the ground. FDA and Dr. Shuren was very good in providing full-time employees to help make that a realization. But kicking, MDSAP off with, the Australians, the Brazilians, the Canadians, the Japanese, and the US, and then of course, the official observers with WHO and the EU and so forth was definitely one of my prides as well. Later in my career, I helped transition the Global Harmonization Task Force to the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And again, that's where the MDSAP working group I chaired, and we really made some great progress there. And so I was the associate director for international for the entire center, which also gave me a lot of opportunities to work with my other sister centers at FDA, Center for Drugs and Center for Biologics. But that wasn't new. Even in 2000, I was Dr. Janet Woodcock's CDRH representative on her 21st Century Drug Initiative, where we actually started the first guidance for combination products. And I was on the authoring group for the GMP for combination products. So again, our sector in medical devices, in vitros, combination products, all kind of interweave, and there's lots of great opportunities throughout. At the end of my career, I retired from FDA in January of 2016, and then joined the consulting world, and worked in the consulting world with NSF International for 5 years, where I recently I left there recently just to take a break. And we could talk about career burnout and stuff. And there's been some, obviously COVID as a pandemic was terrible, and I, my sympathy for anybody who lost folks, but there's been some blessings that have come about. And I know some of your podcasts are talking and have talked about some of those, but for me, bringing things back to family is really important. So needed some time to center myself and help my family do some moves and changes in their lives is what I'm doing this summer. So really, really happy to be with you and to talk about some of the experiences I've had through my career with the audience.
No, that's absolutely, amazing. And I've been trying to get you on this podcast for literally the last year, and I know how busy you've been. And I think just listening to you kind of briefly outline your story, you've had some amazing opportunities, but you've also, you've got your fingers in so many pies. You're a mother. You've got, 2 daughters that are at critical, stages in their own lives. Consulting, FDA, working in industry, being instrumental in all of these changes. There's just so much going on. Did you have it all planned since the beginning of like, this is what I want my route to be? This is where I want to end up?
Absolutely not. So I first came and my goal was I'm going to work for FDA for 5 years, then I'm going to go into industry. Well, 24 years later, you can see that plan didn't work exactly as I thought. And having young adult daughters that are female engineers and dealing with their peers, both females and gentlemen, it's really important that I tell them that, yes, you can and should have a path that you think you want to do now, but it's not going to be a straight path, and rarely is it going to work out exactly as you planned. It's a journey. It's a zig and a zag, and sometimes it's just as important to know what you don't like as compared to what you do like. So while I would have to say, there was some general thinking and general planning, one of the things that I would encourage my audience to really think about is jump at opportunities, stretch yourself even when you don't think you might be able to do it, you'll learn. It provides a little bit of scariness, if you will, but that excitement also keeps you very invigorated in your job and your career. And again, there is a balance between careers and families. And it's a lot of personal decisions and some very, very personal decisions that I made. It was very appropriate for me, wanting to raise 2 strong daughters who were STEM oriented, even, as they were little, to show that you can have a career and still, have a strong family life. So a lot of personal decisions come along in careers, but I do encourage people to stretch themselves and take on opportunities and jump into things when they can.
I think it's
no straight career path for me.
it's so important though, isn't it, to sort of to just be open to it as well, because I think if you're open-minded and just receptive to opportunities, it gives you the chance to at least evaluate them and say, do you know what, I'm going to go for that, or maybe I'm not going to go for that. But sometimes, even when I'm working with candidates, sometimes I find people, they're just really closed, like truly closed, and then it's kind of like, right now is absolutely not an option. I'm not looking at anything right now. And then all of a sudden there's this push of, I need to desperately find a job, and you're less in the driving seat. So Kim, I've got a question for you. What opportunity did you take that when you look back, you said, I'm so glad I did that?
Well, definitely one of the first things that got me into the position at FDA that I did was, I remember going into my boss's office and saying, I want to get involved in international standards and in standards. In taking that step, it then allowed him to mentor me. And that's how I actually, eventually took over the project of revising the GMPs to what is now the 96 quality system regulation. So a bit of it was self-initiative of, coming in and saying, where might I learn more? So whether you're in regulatory affairs and that's, going after the RAC certification, or you're a quality engineer, a quality person going after some of the ASQ certifications, getting yourself out there, getting yourself benchmarking on your own time, to be frank, really, really helps and opens up opportunities that you have no idea down the road where they might pan out for you. So, again, it was going into his office and saying, hey, this sounds really cool. I want to be involved in 176. I want to understand more about the standards process, ISO 9001. That led then when TC 210 Working Group 1 was formed for me to be a very, automatic shoo-in because I had already developed some of that experience. So in all of those opportunities, basically put me in the driver's seat of really having the opportunity to work internationally, to draft that regulation, to draft that preamble, to set policy. And really importantly for me is to also go out and talk to industry and train industry and do the comment periods and really to formulate that policy was great. But it was that first step of saying, hey, this sounds kind of fun. Is there any opportunities for me to be able to join this standards work?
It's actually being proactive. It was you going out there and saying, hey, can I do this? Or can I get involved? As opposed to waiting for something to come to you.
Exactly. Now, sometimes it can be, there can be opportunities that come to you and you have to be willing to jump and to be able to put some of that extra work in, or to be able to join some of those other mentoring groups. Different companies have different mentoring groups, or even if I know I'm very, very shy, as you can tell. But I'm just kidding. As everybody pretty much knows, I'm not shy at all. But there are people that are extreme introverts that still have to get up and present. So even things like Toastmasters that some of the jobs offer, and being willing to go out and share your expertise either on a bigger, more formal stage at major conferences, or even a little bit less and informal at, whether it be RAPS chapter meetings or ASQ divisional meetings, or again, even just smaller work meetings, and be willing to give brown bag lunches. To share your expertise and to encourage others to share, because one of the things that you'll find as anybody goes through their career, it is the relationships that you build that when you look back really, really matter most.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking about. It's not just the opportunities or just like or the experience that you get from taking these opportunities. The example that you referenced before is the network that you built by taking that first opportunity that then led to the second one. Because when people are thinking, okay, well, who do we know? People always go to their network first. Who do we know that can help with this problem? And because you had already taken that first opportunity and already got your foot in the door, then you sprang to mind for the second one. And that's what I see very often. Even with my own career, I've seen that. It's all about the network that you build and the relationships that you build and being present. Okay, another question I have for you. So what opportunity didn't you take that you regret not taking when looking back on your career?
Oh, that's a harder one. That is actually pretty hard. You didn't prep me for that one. So, there would have been other opportunities possibly to leave FDA earlier. Sometimes, I would see the ability to be able to go and work for a major company and to be able to really get into some cutting edge technology. Not that I couldn't do that with the agency, but honestly, the agency is receiving, the applications and reviews and so forth. So there was a couple times that I said, oh, that might have been really cool to be able to be on the forefront of that innovation early in development. But honestly, I can't say that it was a regret, because like anything, especially looking back, you make personal choices at different times. And for me, having the balance of being able to go into work at 6 a.m. and leave at 3 p.m. at FDA. FDA was very progressive relatively now. Everybody's talking about working from home, but I will tell you, for 24 years at FDA, I had 2 days work at home, for 24 years, even before it was common. And, having that ability to have that work at home and be able to have flexible work hours such that I can come home and be with the girls and be part of their afternoon activities was all personal decisions that I made, and I honestly don't have regrets. So from a career path perspective, could I have joined a company? Could I have maybe, climbed the corporate ladder differently? Possibly, but I don't regret that from an overall work-life balance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so what kept you at FDA for 24 years? Because that's an incredible amount of time for somebody to retain, for a company to retain one of their, or an agency to retain one of their employees.
Well, I will tell you, to be quite honest, that family work-life balance was absolutely fundamental. As I mentioned, my husband was Navy, so he didn't have as much flexibility as possible. He had to be at the Navy Yard by any time before 7:30, and he could leave anytime after 5:30 when there wasn't an emergency or when he wasn't on call 24/7. So having myself being able to have that family work-life balance and that predictability with the agency was very key. But also, I was very, very fortunate, again, in part because I was ambitious and went after opportunities. But I moved very, very rapidly through, what is called the general scale as far as getting promotions, being, the national GMP quality system expert and then the international expert. But even when the promotions started to cap off, which they do, there were always opportunities to get involved in other things. So like I mentioned, getting involved with combination products. And boy, you want to talk about studying different cultures and psychologies. We could talk about the study of, pharma and med devices. So always having different opportunities to learn. So that was always key for me, being able to grow, being able to continue to learn. International always provided opportunities for learning and growth. And again, I was very fortunate because I was involved with GHTF, I was involved with IMDRF, I was involved in those international standards groups. I worked very, very closely with, a whole host of exceptionally brilliant international people that constantly kept me challenged. So I never felt stagnant. I never felt stagnant at my career. When I did decide to leave FDA, it was in part because I was looking at, okay, what am I going to do for the last 10 years of my career? And how can I take this experience of 24, 25 years and go forward? But I was very, very fortunate, and the agency provided a lot of opportunity for growth and technologically and innovation and growth from not only a personal perspective, but from a technical perspective as well.
It's not about spending a certain amount of time in a job or a certain amount of time at a company, because it's more about like, how do you develop during that time there? And if you're at a company for 20 years, but every 3 or 4 years you're getting promoted or you're involved in various different groups, you're learning and developing new skills, you don't need to move just so that it reflects on your CV that you're moving from company to company. It's all about but equally, if you're in a company for 15 years and doing the same job over and over again and not actually having any development, then, as you said, then you can potentially stagnate. So it's really about, what are you learning, and are you feeling challenged, and are you pushing yourself? And if your current company allows you to do that, then there's no reason for you to have to look elsewhere. And I think that you gave a really, really good example of the importance of actual well-being, and how it's not just work and life is so blended together, isn't it? It's not just about your professional career and your professional life, but it's how does that fit with me personally. And we're seeing that so much more after COVID. We're speaking to people who are saying, I want to work for a company that is promoting work-life balance, or that will give me the opportunity to work 2 or 3 days from home, that will give me the opportunity to, if I prefer, to work late in the evenings because it works well for my family. And so it's amazing to hear that, the agency was actually doing that 20 years ago.
Yes, they were. And I'll have to be honest, they were very good about it. there were certain things that you had to do. So you have to be careful because some people feel a sense of entitlement. And so I would highly discourage that. Flexible workplace, work at home was never you weren't entitled to it. You actually had to earn it. And we used to have to keep journals. We used to have to keep journals of pretty much all our hours, all our calls and everything else. And those journals could be spot checked. Now, were they honestly spot checked frequently? No. In fact, my one boss would tell me she loved when I was working at home because she knew if she called me, I'd pick up the phone and I'd be right there, as compared to when I was on campus, I'd probably be, at this building or that building, and she had a harder time tracking me down when I was on campus. So some of these flexible work arrangements that people have become a lot more familiar with after COVID, don't think of them as an entitlement. Yes, you can desire them, but you have to earn them. You have to put in your dues, and you have to show whoever your boss is that you can accomplish to the same level of competency and proficiency the work product that they need, regardless of the workspace. So that's one thing that I remind, especially some of the young folks that I mentor. Don't come in with a sense of entitlement. Pay your dues. You have to earn that. You have to earn that respect. You have to show them that you can produce and you can, give them the work product that they need, regardless of the location that you're at. It is important though. And so if you want that and earn it, then a company, then you should find a company that will reward that and will work with you in that regard.
I know mentorship is something really important to you, and helping kind of the next generation coming through is something that we've spoken about quite a few times actually. What other advice would you give to somebody who wants to enter this industry in regulatory or quality?
Don't pigeonhole yourself in any particular aspect. Our industry is so wide, and what I teach a lot of the university students who don't really understand what the industry offers, and to be quite honest, the industry does not do a great job of really going into universities and showing them all the different aspects of what our industry does. Academics tend to really focus on design, innovation, early design, engineering classes, scientific classes. That's where the universities and academia focus on. And of course, that's there. But there is so many other aspects that they can use their engineering or their scientific degrees, whether that be quality engineering, whether that be regulatory affairs, whether it be process engineering, whether it be supply chain, whether that be failure modes, effects analysis teams. There's so many different aspects out there that people need to explore. And this is, again, when I mentor some of the younger folks at university coming into their first jobs, especially, I say, try to take a look at several different aspects, and don't necessarily, again, take that mindset of, I have to make this decision. This is the decision that it's going to be for the rest of my career. It's not. If you like the engineering, great. Stay close to the engineering or the technical side, the science, the bench work, and stay close to that, shortly out of university. But know that, when you want to change, you might be able to go into quality, you might be able to go into manufacturing, you might be able to go into regulatory, and to look at those different, as I call them, zigs and zags, and explore them. And don't think that your first step into industry is, going to be where you are the rest of the time. But the sad part is I find so many university students that automatically think they need a PhD, which they absolutely do not. Not in our industry. I mean, obviously, there are some aspects that if you want to do, bench testing and so forth, that it might be appropriate to have a PhD. I would argue that, a good solid bachelor's degree is just as good as, maybe you want to get your master's and have the company help you to get that master's, and not necessarily stay in academia before you get that experience. But I find so many younger generation think they have to stay in university, spend that money. And many of them think automatically to med school in the medical industry. And they kind of find the medical device industry later when they kind of decide, oh gosh, I don't want to do the long years of med school and or the residency. So I think this is where we have an opportunity in our industry to get into the universities more and show these young up and coming talent all the different aspects, because honestly, we need them. I mean, if any time in my 30 years, we need talent in our industry sector, it is right now. God bless the notified bodies. They've got a really tough job, but they have been gobbling up all kinds of talent with regard to technical experts and auditors and all of that, which is leaving a void. And so I feel at my stage of my career, an obligation to try to start mentoring that next generation, because we need, you're not going to be able to, there's only so many people that you're going to be able to pluck with that, 10, 15 years experience into all these really critical positions right now. We have to start developing that next generation of workers in our industry.
I totally agree with you, and awareness is absolutely critical. I've been speaking as well at a couple of universities around careers in MedTech and what does that look like, and something that, once you've been working in the industry, you kind of forget like how much people don't know before they join and before they enter. And 100%, it's so innovative, and we're advancing so quickly. But there's a lot of people retiring in the next few years, and where is that new talent coming from? So raising awareness is absolutely critical. But I found it really interesting that you mentioned at the beginning of this talk that you always had the goal to work for FDA. Obviously you stayed there for 24 years, but what made you feel at that early stage in your career that working for FDA was going to kind of help you get to wherever you wanted to go?
Well, to be frank, in part it was locale. So because I knew, my husband and I were in the DC metro area, there is some biotech, but we're not Minneapolis, we're not Boston, we're not the Chicago area where it's a booming medical device industry. So I have a very good friend, still a very good friend who went to Penn State with me. We were at Buron together. And when I said, I'm going to be in the DC area, she's like, go work for FDA for 5 years, and then you'll be invaluable, when you go into industry. So it's people like that help mentor and give ideas. And so in part it was locale, to be quite honest. But I will tell you, once I got in, you have a sense, and I don't want to say power in a bad way, because it's, I've actually seen some investigators and auditors that have a bit of an ego that's not appropriate in a regulatory setting. But you do have the power of really being able to make and change policy and being instrumental in, I found that even though, Pakul Patel was the person in charge of software as a medical device. I worked very closely with him in developing the IMDF work group, and I found that, exceptionally exciting to be able to have some groundbreaking opportunities to develop policy around this area. So, government is a very, very, legitimate pathway for folks. And again, talk about growth and being able to expand yourself. You can be very instrumental in laying down interpretations and policies and so forth. That comes with a responsibility too, though. So, but it's all good. So those were some of the factors that were playing for me when I made that decision to join FDA early in my career.
You spoke about somebody, so this conversation being instrumental in helping you sort of orientate, or at least opening the minds to pursuing a career with FDA. Who else, if you look back on your career, who else has been instrumental in helping you kind of shape your journey?
So there's a couple of folks, again, internationally. So one of my first mentors at FDA, Fred Hooten, again, he was the one that gave me some of those initial opportunities. But when I got into the Global Harmonization Task Force, there's been some fabulous mentors, many of which many of you may know, people like Norbert Anselman in the commission, Dr. Putsize, God bless Gordon Hickson when he was at MHRA, and then he was instrumental in developing the Global Harmonization Task Force, and people from industry, Victor Dorman Smith. Some of these folks were some of the people that on the other side of the pond were the first to develop the directives. They were, the first to develop the EN 46001 and 2 standards. So there was a lot of folks that I have great respect for and taught me a lot not just diplomacy and negotiation, but again, the personal relationships and experiences that you build. Some of those key and foundational relationships were absolutely wonderful.
So some of those names that you've mentioned are just, absolutely, they've been instrumental in shaping kind of where we are today with medical device and regulation. But one thing that did jump out at me is that all these names I think that you've mentioned, they're all men.
That's true. That's very true. I will tell you that even though our industry sector is very favorable to females and different ethnic backgrounds, I've been in many situations in my life where being a female has been a bit difficult. Obviously, the Army was one. One thing that a lot of people don't know is I also used to referee college basketball, and actually even I refereed the U.S. Olympic tryouts, and so forth. Wow. Refereeing. It was fun back when I was younger and was running up and down the court a whole lot more, but it was very much a man's world, and even though we were refereeing the women's game, it was very difficult to break through. So there were different aspects of my life where I had different challenges, if you will, as a female. As a whole, the medical device pharma combination product is much more favorable to women because the percentages are better. And you do have companies like Medtronic who have very open goals about hiring and wanting females in executive positions, and Boston Scientific and so forth. But I will tell you, there are still challenges. And I personally had some challenges early in my career and later in my career, unfortunately, where that mindset of, not being an older male definitely had some issues going. And as a female, you have to work through those. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we should kind of just step back and take a step away. There are times when you have to find a middle ground. There are times that you need to challenge the establishment. And again, you need to be strong, but this is where that network is so important. This is where having a network of other females or other ethnic groups that you have a bond or affiliation can really help you overcome some of those challenges that inevitably all of us are going to face. And I will be frank in the fact that there were some challenges, especially early on for me as a very young female, entering into some of those international settings where I again was the only female in the whole room. And there were times when I was practically invisible. I mean, literally receiving lines where I would have people literally walk by me because I was not the stereotype. But it was the same group that later in my career, after I've made accomplishments, were the most wonderful people. And you just had to earn their trust. You had to earn their respect. So there's a lot of really positive ways that you can get through it. Again, some challenges are different, but having a network or group of similar and like people will help you get through some of those challenges as well. But we're very fortunate in our industry that we do have a very nice network of females, and we do have a high propensity of females in our industry, as compared to my older daughter who's in aerospace. And wow. Yeah, she's blonde, beautiful, smart, and she is always with a group of male engineers. But her company has a group called Lift, where a group of females, they get together and they're always mentoring, encouraging, and lifting other females into helping them with their career. So I would recommend that people explore those networks and take advantage of those networks.
it's just so important, the network, isn't it? And when it comes to careers, and when it comes to just helping develop yourself, or just getting that support of other people who are in similar situations, or mentoring, right, who have had similar experiences, where you can learn and share. You know, a career is really a journey, and you're not on your own doing it. It's really, you know, a journey where you're encountering people along the way who you'll learn from, they'll learn from you, and that network ultimately it all comes down to the relationships that you build, doesn't it? So I just wonder, so listening and watching you sort of talk about some of these experiences, are there any moments or examples where you look back and you kind of say, wow, that was really tough, but I learned from it, and, you know, was able to apply it, you know, times where you felt particularly challenged, and, you know, where you really didn't think that you'd be able to kind of get through it, and then you actually managed to?
Yeah, so I will tell you that the single audit program was a very long journey. As I mentioned, it was literally a 20-year journey. I mean, and being young and idealistic back in the early 90s, I'm like, okay, you know, the requirements between ISO and the regulation are about 93% harmonized. Now we just need to harmonize how we audit. Then we can harmonize how, you know, we utilize the audit reports, blah, blah, blah. And I laid out this scheme in a book that we were using to teach the new regulation, never thinking that it was going to be so blessed hard to get to that point. And, you know, and I look back and I look at the milestones. So one of the first milestones was the US EU MRA, which was utterly disastrous, to be quite frank. Okay, so the medical device US EU MRA did not do well for many different reasons. You know, the different application requirements, the setup was interesting. It was where, you know, the US FDA was supposed to monitor third parties who were applying the European regulation, but yet we at FDA weren't experts in the European regulation. And the commission was going to oversee, you know, notify bodies that were going to implement FDA regulations, and the commission wasn't experts in, you know, FDA. So it was really kind of backward. There was a whole bunch of things that made that not successful, but it allowed opportunities for the first group of notified bodies to start taking some training that the FDA investigators got, and showing them how the legal systems were different, and how the collection of objective evidence was different, how, you know, writing up non-conformances that would be put in front of a court of law, how you had to be much more particular about how you write, and sharing some of those experiences and getting that group under the EU MRA, EU-US MRA, that led then FDA to the third-party inspection program. Again, the third-party inspection program, not all that fantastically fabulous as far as a success program. Again, you know, there was many people in the US Congress that didn't want to have that delegation of US FDA authority to third parties, and overtly put things into the programs that made it difficult or cumbersome for manufacturers to apply. There wasn't a whole lot of incentive, but following the US EU MRA, going into that third party inspection program, again, allowed additional opportunities for some of the audits of, you know, two different methods of what I'll say, you know, whether it be the Canadian CAMCAS or the European notified body, how those third party audits were and how they, in relationship to FDA, and how they were performed. And then again, it was that relationship with Health Canada that FDA had throughout the years. From the early 90s, I was, you know, so closely working with Health Canada. And whenever the Canadian, every year, in the beginning it was every 6 months, and then later it was every year, Health Canada brought their CAMCAS registrars in. It was mandatory that they send 1 or 2 delegates every year to sit down with Health Canada, Standards Council of Canada, and kind of calibrate on the CAMCAS program. And FDA was invited, TGA was invited, and the more and more sharing and understanding happened, that led to the Canadian-US PMAP program, the Multipurpose Audit Program. It took 3.5, almost 4 years to get 10 companies to allow us to do just 10, and it turned out to be 11 audits where, a notified body would perform an audit to the CAMCAS procedures as well as the FDA's and write up 2 different audit reports for us to be able to say, look, there's not that much difference. There's just not that much difference. Here's a couple key factors that we need to resolve. And it was those 3 programs that, again, were not considered fabulous successes within their own rights, that actually were the stepping stones for MDSAP, that, over time built that understanding, built that experience such that it allowed us to be able to kick off the official MDSAP program in 2011. And I'll be honest, it was a disappointment not to be able to get the EU in right from the go. I remember sitting in Brussels with Jackie Miner at the commission, and to be frank, I get it. It was right at the time when they were having the whole debate as to whether the directives were going to be a recast or a revision, and then once the decision made to be revision, that the whole legal aspects, there was a lot going on in that front. And then quite frankly, there was something that I wasn't able to solve even earlier on, and that was the confidentiality arrangements with the EU had to be with each of the then 28 member states. So the 5 MDSAP countries had to have these. In the US, it's called State Department, but it's at the high level of government, these confidentiality arrangements. And, and for the EU, it couldn't just be with the commission, it had to be with each of the national member bodies. So there were challenges, there were absolutely disappointments. Some programs were definitely not as successful, but they all form building stones and foundations to what now is doing quite well. Still needs, in my humble opinion, some tweaks, some revisions, and so forth, as it should. But now we look at the MDSAP program, we look at the reliance it provided, even in Europe during COVID for some of those decisions, and hopefully in the future. But there was a lot of not so successful things that happened prior to that buildup.
Wow, what a legacy, though, right? I mean, you must look at that with an immense sense of pride to have been able to have that impact and that idea. And even though it was so long in the making, and there was all these challenges that you had to kind of overcome, what a legacy, Kim. Honestly, I'm honored to actually have you on the on the show. One thing I did want to talk about, and you kind of touched on it right at the beginning. Obviously, you're a brilliant mind. You're somebody who has really impacted our industry. But you're a mother, you're a wife, you've got kids, and you mentioned burnout, and I'd love to just explore that a little bit more with you to actually understand what that experience is, because you come across as an absolute Wonder Woman, capable of absolutely anything, and you mentioned that you felt that burnout.
So number one, we are in the healthcare field, so we're all pretty attuned to physiology. Is you do have to know your body, and sometimes it's your body, but you actually have to listen to your body. So personally, while I loved before COVID, I was on the road and traveling all the time, and I missed my regular regime of workouts and eating better and so forth when on the road. So in the beginning of COVID, it was great. I loved being able to get back into a more predictable routine of exercise and eating better, was losing weight and so forth. But then it was getting to the point, 12, 15 months into COVID, where I'm sitting literally 10, 11 hours on a screen on my butt, even with my workouts in the morning. Now I'm losing more weight than I want. And actually I was having a hard time stopping losing weight, and I wasn't trying, but I literally would have to set an alarm to eat something because I was hopping from one Zoom meeting to another Zoom meeting to another, so planning to eat is, seemingly as simple as that, to make sure you get enough water and hydration and so forth, was really starting. And good thing about our industry is all these lovely little, Fitbits, Apple Watches, and everything else that also tell you where your heart rates are and some of your blood pressure and so forth. And so I was just seeing signs that it wasn't, I needed to take a step back. I needed to take a step back and recenter. Again, everybody has different stages of their life. I mean, my girls obviously are grown up now, and once upon a time, I would use the fact that I had to get home for them as my hard cutoff. But they were all off and out. My husband for a while there was, in the Navy, but then he retired. And then when he retired, he was brilliant. And, he would go and do his thing, and he'd have dinner ready for me. And the most he was saying, okay, you really need to stop. You need to eat. It's dinner time. But you can start seeing the effect on, the family, and it is harder, with COVID. You have to make sure that you plan that time sometimes, and that you stick to it. This is why there's a responsibility, if you do continue flexible work hours, that you make sure you get your work in and the times that you allot yourself. But where I was failing to turn it off. And so that's why I decided I needed to stop, take some time off, take a step back, recenter, to try to get that balance back again.
That's I feel like so many people go through this and they don't talk about it enough. And especially when you're you, and everybody wants a piece of you, and you're working in an international environment globally, work never stops. It's always like daytime somewhere, right? Whether you're working, you could be working with Asia, then you're working with Europe, then you're working with the US, then you don't sleep. And so, it's absolutely critical, because then ultimately, there's nothing that's more important than your health, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, health in your family and friends. I mean, it's what we're here on earth for. I mean, yes, work is exciting. It's a way that we meet people and we make friends, but ultimately, it's a means to an end, and that end should not be your death. Sadly, it really should be, to a point where you're able to enjoy your friends and your family and your time with those people more. So we just have to keep that in mind sometimes.
So right now you're taking a break, you're aligning, you're working with your work, spending time with your family, with your girls. Have you got any idea? I mean, what does the future hold for Kim Trautman?
So the verdict is still out. I haven't been able to turn off completely as much as I like. Still, for me, it's important. So I'm still giving talks with reps. I'm still, doing some of the conferences. I'll still be doing this speaking engagements over the summer. Working with you is always lovely. Still working in my standards committee. But as far as, what I'll do come fall, still to be determined. Just so many things have been happening again with graduations and daughters buying houses and having to move this summer. It hasn't really slowed down all that much. So the jury is still out as to exactly what the fall and the winter will bring for me.
Well, I'm sure everybody is watching to see, what your next move is going to be. But I think, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. One question I do have, and I'd love to get your perspective on, is what is the legacy that you want to leave on the world?
I honestly feel like the medical device single audit program was the legacy that I worked very, very hard for. I obviously still care about it. I continue to provide feedback on it. Still want 13485 to stay aligned and appropriate to allow some of those harmonization and convergence initiatives. Now, for me at this stage, I think that legacy is established as much as I'm going to be able to contribute to it. So now it's really going back to the discussions we had about giving back to mentoring, to developing that next generation. Again, having daughters at this stage, maybe it's just allowed me to see, there was this one young lady just at graduation here a couple weeks ago who just didn't, all 4 years wanted to go to med school and just said, I can't do it. I don't want to do it, but had zero idea of all the clinical opportunities that were in our medical device industry sector that you don't need a med degree for, or, an MD degree for. So right now for me, it's, being on the RAPS board, being on Penn State, my alma mater, actually our whole family's alma mater, industry professional engineering advisory board to give back to the universities, and then mentoring programs such as yours, such as the Xavier's young peer pros and other things. That's where I like to spend the majority of my energy as I take these later steps in careers.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure you've impacted so many careers, and so many careers of people that you probably don't even know. It's such an inspiration. It's been so good to have you on, Kim. I feel like we need to have a part 2 because there's still so much I want to talk about, but we're out of time. But thank you so much. To all of you listening, please follow Kim on LinkedIn. She shares some really interesting content. Keep your eyes peeled for what she's going to do next. Comment on this episode, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, throw them out there. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on what you've learned listening to Kim's story. Kim, all the best with whatever you're going to be doing next. I'm definitely going to be watching. And that's it for another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed. That was Kim Trautman. Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you so much, and good luck to everybody, and hope to see everybody, or as many people as I can, face to face here in the next year.
Wonderful. And I'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed. Take care.